Friday. It is Friday, and I hope you're all ready for today. As you know, here at AACUC, we start on time and we end on time. So greetings and thank you for joining us for the AACUC Commitment to Change Credit Unions Unite Against Racism Friday Conversation, Pandemic Habits That Stick. We're so glad you're here. Now, please note the housekeeping rules for this afternoon's event. Now, we know that life happens and you may need to step away, take a call, or even have a conversation. So we ask that you immediately please mute the volume on your microphone and your devices, as well as stop your video. These functions can be found at the bottom of your screen or your device. You're very important to us, so please do not forget to start your video upon return as we are truly connected. And remember, unless you are called upon as a program participant, please keep your volume muted on your microphone and or device. Now, we do encourage you to please engage with us throughout this afternoon with the virtual clap and chat. If you have any questions, send them in chat. We will try to get through all of them. Now, without further ado, please help me welcome COO and Chief Strategy Officer of CU Solutions Group, Brandy Stankovic.
Thank you, Esty, and thank you, Renee, and the board of AACUC, and thank you to all of you for being here and being committed to learning and networking and sharing with all of your colleagues. It's wonderful to see so many friendly faces. Hello, and as Esty mentioned, my name is Dr. Brandy Stankovic, and today I am joined with an esteemed panel for this Commitment to Change conversation. So they're going to share some of their insights on habits, some of the lifestyle changes and considerations things that we need to be keeping in mind that are stemming from the pandemic. What's changed in our lives? What habits maybe are we falling back into from pre-COVID days? And how can we continue to create change and manage the well-being of our employees and our organizations? It's amazing how quickly our mindset can shift, right? With COVID just now entering the rear view, it's the perfect time for us to solidify new patterns for success. So I'm really excited to hear from our experts. To start us off, I'd like to ask the panelists to briefly share their name, role, and commitment to AACUC. Ashley, will you begin?
Good morning from the West Coast, everyone. My name is Ashley Franklin, and I am the Vice President of Branch Operations at Schools First Federal Credit Union, and I serve as the Chapter President for the West Coast chapter of the AACUC.
Hi, and good afternoon, everyone. I am Dania Dorman. I am AACUC and your Chief Experience Officer. So happy to be with you this afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juan Fernandez Ceballos, and I'm the President and CEO of the Credit Union Association of New Mexico. And I couldn't be happier to be here with all of you today. I served on the inaugural exchange program, that cultural exchange program that AACUC hosted last year, and just fell in love with the AACUC right then and there.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ed Presnell. I'm in Augusta, Georgia. I'm a regional business executive for Peach State Federal Credit Union. I'm retired from another credit union where I was chief administrative officer and vice president. And I had really several departments, including human resources and marketing and government affairs and whatever, you name it. And I'm delighted and honored to be part of this panel. I have been involved with AACUC since 2007 when I attended my first conference in Baltimore. And I have served now 3 terms, and I'm up for re-election on hopefully my 4th term in August for the organization. It's been an honor to see how we have grown this organization, both organically and professionally throughout the years, and how much of an impact we are having across not only the United States, but I feel like across the globe, but specifically in the United States, because that's where we all work. So thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. Now, this conversation stemmed from an article, Danya, that you wrote in reflecting on the pandemic and how we can inspect and connect with one another, and also to what we should expect in the future. Can you tell us a little bit about the pandemic habits that maybe are fading away and what strength or wisdom that you've gained?
Absolutely. Right. So Brandy, as you mentioned, I was at lunch with a few brilliant minds, and the conversation was about returning back to the hustle and bustle of meetings and travel and all the things that were expectations before COVID. And I just took a minute to think, man, I think there are things that came about during the pandemic that we shouldn't be quick to drop, and things before the pandemic that we shouldn't be quick to pick back up, right? And so when I sat in that thought, I came up and summarized it with those 3 words that you mentioned: inspecting, connecting, and expecting. And so for me, I feel like those are words that can be applied personally and also organizationally at an enterprise level. So the wisdom or the strengths that I found from those 3 words were essentially being in touch. So being in touch with your own emotions, but being intentional with being in touch with others. So when it comes to being introspective, we were all forced to pause and reflect and think about, what's important, where am I feeling valued, where am I being valued? And organizationally, I think organizations that really took that to heart, they were able to better prioritize and make sure that they were working on the things that really drove positive outcomes or meaningful change. When it comes to inspecting, I think that's the most valuable lesson learned there. And connecting, for those of us who are either remote or hybrid, the lesson learned there is those water cooler moments don't happen. They're less often, right? Particularly if you are remote, they just don't happen at all. So we have to be intentional with calling up that coworker, calling up that friend and asking, how are you? Not how are you feeling, but really, how are you? So that we are listening to each other, right? And more importantly, in the companies that did it right, they not only listened, but they took action on what they heard, right? And so that's how we'll be able to move forward in a more positive way. And just with expecting, I don't know about you, but every day was something new, whether it was from work or the news. So being able to expect that change, optimize that change, make it a catalyst for something as an opportunity. I think those were really my takeaways. And those are the things that I want to make sure that I personally are able to move forward with, and organizationally that we carry forward as well.
A great point. And Juan, have you seen the same or felt the same on the league level with all the credit unions and different employees that you touch?
I do, yes. When you think about it, I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat the pandemic. I mean, it was an awful, awful time. Many of us lost loved ones, family members, friends. But out of that, the reality is that there were some things. It gave us a time to pause and really prioritize and think about what really matters in life. I remember that feeling of loneliness, especially when the shutdowns were happening, and I spent a lot of time thinking about the things that I missed, and I developed certain habits that I hope I don't lose. I hope we don't lose, because I realized, it's important to touch base with loved ones. It's important to touch base with credit union friends, family. And many of us would get together on FaceTime, on Zoom, regularly to learn from each other. And I think that it actually opened up a lot of credit unions to a lot of knowledge and connections that might have not happened otherwise. And what I really, really hope, I mean, I'm so excited that these conversations continue because they're so important. And I really hope that we don't lose sight of that human connection, because I think it's so tempting to rush back as Danya was saying, to the traveling, and the go. And when we don't stop to listen, when we don't pause to think and make connections, we stop learning. And I think it's so important that if there's one thing that I really appreciated, was those connections that we made during the pandemic. And I know it's counterintuitive because we were segregated, but I think that pushed us into connecting in different ways that we didn't before.
And in some ways, I'm thankful. I know it sounds weird, but thankful for the length of time the pandemic went on, because if it had only gone on the month or so that we all envisioned initially or thought it was going to occur, we would have immediately returned back to the way life was pre-COVID, right? And so it almost forced us to think longer term about these new ways of instituting behaviors, right? Have you seen some of that, Ashley, thinking a little bit longer term?
Absolutely. You know, I think about some of the great behaviors that I picked up during the pandemic, you know, turning on that wash your hands feature on your Apple Watch. That's probably one of the ones, unfortunately, that has faded away. And, you know, some of the other pesky ones that you wish you didn't keep, like binge watching Bridgerton or Ready to Love. Nevertheless, those connections that we have made now during the pandemic are deeper in some ways, because we wouldn't have been otherwise able to connect using these types of technologies. I can reach out, I can meet a new friend that I might not have met before. So we definitely have to hold on to those key aspects of the new pandemic lifestyle that we have gained.
And Juan, if you can continue on in what you were building on and prioritizing, what did you learn about yourself during the pandemic regarding lifestyle or your employees' lifestyle? A lot of people discovered things about remote work or at home workouts or the different parts of pandemic life that we didn't even know about ourselves. And there's some things, you know, that we don't want to go back to.
I'm doing pretty good. What's going on?
Any thoughts?
Yes. So I learned a lot of things. First of all, that I knew I was a people person, but I really realized that at that point. I think many of us didn't realize how much time we spent commuting until then, because that freed up a lot of time for me to do things like working out at home. I never used to like working out at home. I started really liking that. But the reality is that I think if you look at our teams now, at our credit unions, at our leagues, the people that are working there are there because they want to be there. You know, they want to be part of your team, because right now there is a war for talent. I mean, that's the word that everyone uses. But the positive thing about a war for talent is that the people that are working at your credit union, that are working for you, are choosing to be there. You know, they're bringing their whole selves to work. And I think many of my team members yearned for the moment when they could come back and be together again. So I think it's given us an appreciation, a deeper appreciation to each other as teams, a deeper appreciation for the work that we do. I mean, when I sit back and I see all the sacrifices that credit union leaders did during the pandemic, that are doing today during the new economic downturn that we're entering, I'm inspired by that. And I know that our teams are too, because once again, we're here by choice. And in my opinion, I'd rather have teams that are choosing to be there than are there because they can't find anything better elsewhere.
And Ed, you're an expert in this area and leading HR teams. Tell me, what are some of the things that you instituted in the pandemic that are continuing on today? Or are there anything that came out that was a lesson learned and you're leaving it behind when it comes to hybrid teams or some of those, organizational policies?
Thank you. for the one thing, I've personally was impacted in a physical way by the pandemic. I was in the hospital for 20 days, not with COVID, but with double pneumonia, where I tested twice negatively, but I was in a 5-month recovery mode. And that was right after the pandemic. Now, don't feel sorry for me because I'm well and I'm healthy and I am happy to be here. What I learned in that process, and I cannot overemphasize this, that every day we wake up on this side of the ground is a blessing. And it's an opportunity for us to serve others. And it's an opportunity for us to help others. But more importantly, at the end of every conversation I have with all of my contacts, my friends, and I'll just go ahead and say it to y'all, to everybody on this call now, I simply say, I love you, because it may be the last chance you get to tell somebody you love them. As Juan mentioned a while ago, I lost countless friends to the pandemic. I sent out more sympathy cards than I did Christmas cards. And that's a sad comparison. However, we're here, and the ability to operate hybrid, the ability to be more efficient with our working time, I think the ability to pick and choose our travel, people are clamoring to meet in person again. So I hope that bodes well for our conference this summer. I believe it will. I hosted a conference for my Rotary district 2 weeks ago here. We had over 200 people here, which was remarkable. And everybody, to a person, enjoyed the entire content of the conference. It was strictly business, and it was just phenomenal. But at the same time, people just want to be together. But we don't want to forget, we cannot forget where we come from. In the Tarzan scenario in the old movies, Tarzan swung from one tree to another using vines in his tropical jungle. He did not let go of the vine he was coming from until he had a grip on the vine he was going to. And I think that applies now. We're still transferring ourselves back to a new normal, which I hope does include Zoom in a proper way. But more importantly, I think we're more efficient work-wise.
I think you're right. And I appreciate that you brought it back to empathy, though. And that's something that is potentially one that we're moving quickly past. We're getting busy again, and we're starting to use that term. We're so busy. And I was recently at a networking event, and a close friend asked how I was. And so I shared something similar to you, that I have lost an uncle and a couple close friends to COVID, and it's been one hell of a year for me, right? And then they said, well, it's good to hear that things have been going well. And then I thought to myself, were you even listening? And it was one of those moments of we're all just trying to get by. And you're right, we have to remember to be human, and that we've all been through a lot, and that whether it's employees, colleagues, friends, and remembering to slow down. So thank you for that. Any thoughts on that, Danya, Ashley?
Yeah, well, I totally understand what you're saying, Brandy, and I hear you. It takes, I heard someone say this, James Gukeisen, the other day at the conference, 2 ears, 1 mouth. So we have 2 ears to listen more than we speak. So being able to really listen empathetically with our hearts and respond that way is a much more productive way to move forward. And as Ed was talking about his desire to see Zoom continue as we swing from vine to vine, I really like that Tarzan analogy, Ed. It made me think one of the benefits of this pandemic experience was inclusivity. So it brought about an opportunity for us to be more inclusive by having whoever, wherever, be involved in conversations because of technologies like Zoom. Juan was talking about people are at organizations because they want to be there. Well, technology and the appetite for credit unions to be remote or have remote employees gave access to those who may not have been able to physically work at, one of our fantastic credit unions or system partners like AACUC or our leagues, the opportunity to do so. So I'm very appreciative of those positives. Definitely recognize the collective trauma that we all experience and the loss that is not lost on me. But yeah, that was the beauty in terms of our DEI journey, right? Is that ability to bring in inclusivity in a new way.
May I add something, Brandy? As we went through the early parts of the pandemic, I think it needs to be remembered that Renee and the AACUC board had an extremely powerful vision to have a virtual conference, period. We were not going to not have a conference. And lo and behold, we had nearly 1,000 people register for that conference the first year. And then we did it again last year. I can tell you my sister was overpowered by this conference that we did in 2020. And it made a difference. It made a difference in everybody's lives that we were able to seize the moment of challenge and make it a positive experience. And again, we stayed up at night doing men and women conference breakout sessions. Renee made me dress up all day long, and we were cutting up. We were sending pictures of ourselves with our jackets on, but we all had walking shorts on. But seriously, it was a positive move in the right direction, and the commitment to change took place at that very moment in time. And this organization's strength just went off the chart. So I just needed to add that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so bringing things virtual, access to technology, leveling the playing field, access to one another, the broadening the networks, communication styles, all of these things are systems, and it really does have a broad reach. In our organization, even the way we do contracts, right? Making sure that we're covering ourselves and that we have flexibility if things are to change. All of that is a symptom or an after effect of what we've gone through in this last year. As we think about some of those aspects and lifestyle or optimizing our quality of life after the pandemic, Ashley, what do you think? What are some of the quality of life shifts that we'll be looking at now post-pandemic?
Thank you so much, Brandy. What I've learned over the course of life is that people, whenever it comes to change, what people get the most anxious about is not really the change itself as much as it is the things that they want to stay the same. And so you think about this pandemic that we've been in, where our entire lives were forced to do something that we didn't want to do, which was change. We had to change. And so I'm hopeful that many aspects that made us move into where we are today to accept this as being our normal, we will continue to enhance and continue to maximize. The way we serve our members is very different today from how we served our members pre-pandemic. We had to be creative, nimble, pivot, do all kinds of things because traditional methods of serving our members may not have been available to them during that time. So I hope that we continue to embrace that creativity. I hope that we embrace the connections that we have created and maintained through this time of pandemic. And then I hope that we continue to embrace this cultural and social revelation and revolution that we are in the midst of and continue to push that forward as well.
And also you bring up, and it goes back to the article, Danya, of having an expectation of change, right? An expectation of elevating our growth, our message. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. If you can anticipate change, then it won't catch you off guard. You still have to deal with the change and know how to adapt which way you're going to move. I'm thinking of another experience recently at this week's conference. The speaker talked about an athletic stance, or I played basketball briefly, very briefly. And we talked about like this 3-point stance. So with the ball, you could, pass it, you could dribble it, you could shoot it. So I share that because when it comes time to encounter that change, as Ashley mentioned, being nimble enough to know where to go and how to pivot is how we're going to optimize and make something impactful rather than have this change be an inconvenience.
Any thoughts, Ed or Juan?
I think that change is inevitable in any form of life. As I get older and more seniorized and my birth certificate fades a little bit, I can look back and see change is a theme that is lifelong. I also tease people a lot, and I say that the only person that really likes change is a baby, if you think about it. However, we must adapt to change. And I go back to what I said earlier, being able to appreciate the fact that we are able to have these kinds of discussions in a forum such as this. Zoom is probably the most brilliant technology that has risen in at least the last 20 years in technology. I just think it goes on, but we have to do these things. We're doing professional work. I do a Sunday school class on Zoom. We don't anymore, but I used to go to Rotary on Zoom. We go to, my college roommates have a bi-weekly meeting on Zoom. We're all still able to laugh at each other. So it's a happy way, but change is inevitable. But there are certain things that people really need that in-person contact. So my encouragement of caution there is, let's make sure we are socially responsible to the health characteristics of that opportunity. I'm not going to preach about this, that, or another. If you feel inclined that the booster shots are important, as I do, take them. If you have reasons not to take them, that's your journey, not mine. I just know what it's like to lay in a hospital bed for 2 weeks or 20 days with everything but a ventilator on. I don't want to ever see that again. But change, I had to change my habits to come back to work. And I was able to do it. And it was acceptable. And we're finally back in the reality. So that's my 2 cents.
And I think you're right on. And I think most people avoid uncomfortable situations. I think we're kind of wired as humans to fear certain change. We like to do what we know works, what we're comfortable with. But if we think back, each of us, thinks back at the greatest growth that each of us has had personally, professionally, even romantically, it's often out of uncomfortable situations, times when we pushed ourselves to doing things that we might have not otherwise because of the circumstance. I mean, and if you think about it, COVID did that in many ways to us. It pushed the credit union industry and movement to trying new things. I can't begin to tell you how many times I used to have conversations with credit union leaders that didn't believe you could really work remotely. They didn't think people would be efficient working remotely. And I think, as Ed said earlier, you don't even have to look anywhere beyond the AACUC. I mean, when you look at how the AACUC team delivers for our communities, is unbelievable. And here we are on Zoom. We're all working in different places, all connecting. And I don't think the world would have gotten here so quickly had we not gone through that experience. So I do think in a way, that's a blessing. It just really showed that in many ways you could be actually much more efficient. You know, I mentioned earlier the commuting time. I mean, think about that. If you live in a city like LA and you're in a credit union, Ashley, I'm looking at you over there in Orange County. Think of how long your employees, spend each and every day in the car, just going to the office. So once again, when you look at efficiencies and the amount of time that people are actually doing the credit union's work, remote work offers a lot of opportunities. And Danya mentioned earlier the fact that it opens you up to a much more diverse talent pool. And I mean, that's right on point. I mean, right now, you no longer as a credit union have to limit yourself at looking at folks that live in your community. You could, especially if you're trying to attract diverse talent, you could look elsewhere in the country. So I think change, as we all know, change is inevitable. And I think it's important to often embrace it and welcome it, because it does bring many times kernels of greatness that we might have overlooked otherwise.
You're right about the fact that most of our strategic plans at our credit unions included some sort of technology transition or adaptation of our mobile products and all that for years and years and years and years. And there's nothing like a global pandemic to force our members to adapt to that literally overnight. So it's absolutely true. And it definitely created major change with both our members and our employees. And I think another really great point that you made is talking about the environment of not thinking we can trust our teams. Even at our organization, we were going to try out that work from home environment one day a week where everybody can go one day. And so the good news is everybody had a laptop because we were going to try that. And so then we were able to employ it. But this forced that process, because my philosophy is if you can't trust your employee working from home, then you probably don't trust your employee. It isn't a matter of it being at home or in the office, right? I mean, we don't need helicopter leadership. Right? And I think that this has taught us a lot about ourselves as leaders too, and how involved we need to be in the oversight of our teams. With that in mind, I'd love to circle back a little bit and talk about, are our teams relocating? I want to open up this panel. Is anybody's employees relocating? Are you changing job functions? Are any positions staying remote that didn't used to be? What's happening on the job front in that way? Who wants to? So Danya, I saw you shaking your head. Can you start us off? Or
yeah, sure. I'm happy to start us off. So I experienced the pandemic at a different organization at Suncoast Credit Union and have since moved over to AACUC in January. And so I'll speak on behalf of AACUC. We operate with distributed teams. So we have a handful of employees, including myself, who are not necessarily located in Atlanta. And so we found, in order to make that work, having clear expectations and communication, whether that's using Teams, making sure that we're in alignment on things that are going on. We have monthly team meetings. We have the tools necessary to make that work as if we were co-located in the same site.
Brandy, all of the above is true. It's all true. We have functions that are becoming hybrid or that have gone completely remote. We had a lot of team members to use this time of pandemic to go back to school, to rediscover themselves. I had people join the USO, true story, decided they wanted to sing for the United States Army. So a lot of people found themselves during this time. And a lot of people also found the credit union movement during this time. And so we have benefited from it. None of us are immune from this great resignation that has happened. Nevertheless, we've been forced to be more nimble. We've been forced to look and think outside of the box, even as leaders, to your great point that, we thought there was only one way to do business or one way to provide world-class service to our memberships. And we had to learn that no, there are many more ways that we can do this. And so the pandemic thrust us into this future that we were probably planning to get there in the next 5 to 10 years. And we had to do so in about 12 months.
I think that the work habits that we've gained through learning how to work remotely and then combining it with working, I guess, in office or in person or outside of the home environment, if you will. I think that change has brought about a better self-discipline to career-oriented people. I did not see, nor did I witness on any occasion what I would call somebody taking advantage of the opportunity to be at home and turn a computer on just to make sure it looked like they were working and then go do something else. I think our productivity has really increased over this last couple of years. And I think we're learning now how to balance that productivity from an internet-based environment to a workspace environment. And I believe that it'll continue. And I think our ability to communicate is so much better if we are positive. Now, the one caution I have there is emails. Emails are one-way conversations. So be careful how we write our emails. So we don't want to come off as being harsh or abrupt in emails if we have a reason. So I asked that's one of the things I learned was to double check what I was saying before I hit the send button. But I think, frankly, that my point really is that our discipline is much, much better and our productivity is much better.
So Brandy, what I'm seeing, at least in New Mexico, is kind of all over the map. I think there are certain jobs that have to be in person for the most part, teller jobs, things like that. So those obviously are going, they've gone back since the shutdowns 2 years ago. And credit unions have slowly begun bringing people back to the office overall. That's the general sense I'm getting. However, it's not the same as it was before. It's a lot of credit unions doing hybrid models, accommodations. And yes, some positions are completely remote, but I have seen a lot more credit unions moving toward a hybrid model. But ironically, we had 2 credit unions that opened up new headquarters either during the pandemic or right before it, and they had these beautiful big buildings that were completely empty for 2 years. And once again, they are bringing a lot of those positions back in a slow manner. But the other thing I'll mention, smaller credit unions obviously experience the pandemic in a very different way than large ones. And I don't know if this was a issue that was shared in other states, but at least in New Mexico, during before the vaccine was available, we had some pretty tight restrictions. I know California probably had very similar ones, where unless basically most retail locations were closed, you had to have social distancing. And for a while, credit union branches were closed all throughout the state, and even voluntarily, a lot of credit unions shut down their lobbies. So a lot of small credit unions didn't have drive-ups. So that presented a unique challenge to those credit unions. Many of them had to put drive-ups or walk-up windows. Many of them had to kind of innovate. But little details like that, I mean, who could have predicted before the pandemic that we were going to be having to rely on drive-ups or walk-ups that, people outside. So I think we need to be innovative and seeing how could we, as we go back to, post-pandemic world, knock on wood, how can we make sure that we take those learned lessons to make sure that smaller credit unions are able to continue serving the members? But another angle that I've seen some credit unions very efficiently do is that they've started really doing a lot more financial counseling, coaching, webinars with topics, and they're able to do it a lot more frequently because it takes a lot less time to plan an online event to bring financial education to members than if they were to do it in person. It's a lot less costly. You don't have to buy a whole bunch of food, et cetera, et cetera. So I think leveraging the technological advances that we have come upon to make sure that we're delivering not just to the general public, but especially to the underserved in our communities is in my opinion, of great importance.
Thank you for that. And there is impact on both the employee level and the member level, to your point, and with whether it's counseling or outreach or technology and in those channels that we're reaching. We at our organization, we closed our corporate office, and so all of our employees are now remote, but we also opened what we're calling a collaboration center. So it's a location where teams can get together, and either it's board meetings or it's strategy sessions or it's team building moments, and we can get there and just bond with one another when we need that human connection and come off of the remote environment. And so there's still the human touch, but then on the majority of time we are remote. And so it's trying to find that balance. And we'll see. I'll let you know in 5 years, we'll get back together and see, how it works. But it is an opportunity to try things that are new. Juan, if I can come back to you, we got a question in the chat. Speaking of, there's been some really great sharing. Thank you, Jacoby, for sharing some of the things happening at your organization. Great sharing that's happening in the chat. Please continue to do that. But we got a question, Juan, and you were speaking to the leadership that's required in this new remote environment, right? And it did, we talked about elevating, it requires us to be better leaders. What are some of the leadership mindset or skills that we need to continue as we move forward in this new post-pandemic?
I think communication is key. And I know that was a challenge early on in the pandemic. How do you continue having open lines of communication with team members, between departments, and ensuring that you set clear expectations of what's expected of your teams and provide constant feedback, I think is important. And once again, going back to the original question of not falling back into old habits, I think a lot of us are back to having meetings back to back and traveling a lot. So I think it's a paramount importance to carve out time to continue having those conversations and resisting the temptation to put those in the back burner. Because even if whether it's in person, whether it's online, I think those things are really, really important. And one thing, by the way, that I was thinking about, going back to what I was saying earlier about serving the underserved and communities. We had 2 credit unions in New Mexico that during the pandemic, they realized that they had an issue with daycare for their employees. And they devised 2 different models where they allowed employees to bring their children, and they were able to learn, to kind of receive tutoring, and employees took turns taking care of them. But I think that's a huge opportunity for credit unions to work with other community partners in our communities, potentially form cooperatives to offer daycare services. I think this is not something that's going away. I think it's a crisis, the cost of daycare, the availability of daycare. And I think we can play a critical role. And once again, that's just an example. I think there are many examples like that, that if we look at some of the challenges that happened during the pandemic, many of them are still here. They might have changed a little bit, but they're still here. And I think we can think outside the box and partner with other credit unions, with other cooperative sectors to come up with solutions for those challenges.
Randy, may I add to that? I totally agree with you, Juan. And I think another thing beyond communication that leaders need to do, for lack of a better word, or a habit to instill is, and it probably won't sound good because we're in the business of serving others, but sometimes you have to put yourself first as a leader. And what I mean by that is checking in with yourself, because if you're not okay, if you're unsettled for whatever reason, then you're not going to be your best for your team. So I think about being on an airplane, flight attendants will tell you if something happens mid-air and the masks come down, put your mask on first, and then you can assist other people. So look for those mask moments where you need to check and see if your mask is on. If, we talk about mental health and well-being, that was a hot topic and still is a very pertinent topic moving forward and moving past the pandemic. So making sure that you have those personal check-ins, that you're solid, and then you can then be available and your full self to assist your team, your community, your members, what have you.
I think we talk about the new normal and this new reality, and some of the leadership really is just recognizing that it is now reality. And that seems obvious, but an example of that is I went and saw my third grade a presentation in his class. I was thrilled to be able to go in the classroom with my third grader. The point I want to make with that is they all had poster boards and they all hand wrote on their poster boards. And I was somewhat astounded at how poor the handwriting was of these third graders, and mine included. Now, with that in mind, I thought to myself, well, these were first graders that were hybrid, second graders that were completely online, and now third graders in the classroom who have not actually spent any time with handwriting. So how would I expect them to have good handwriting other than the time I've spent with him at home, right? And so it was a moment of, this is the reality. I can't be upset about it. It's about recognizing this is the reality and how do we react to that reality moving forward. So that is about nurturing, whether it's employees that have been home, whether it's our own wellness, to your point, Danya, whatever those things are, this is the reality. It's about embracing that and figuring out how it is to move forward in this new normal and this new reality. Now, Ed, I would love to hear, is this a fresh start? What are your fresh start policies that you're instituting? It's our time. What's our energized thing that we can all take home and action on that you're instituting into your organization?
Well, that's a great question, because Fresh Start has several applications. Number one, I think of it when I hear the word Fresh Start, I think about how we treat members who have had financial difficulties, which have happened during this pandemic. So more people have been strapped financially, so we have Fresh Start programs. So that's a program. Now, if we go to I think the crux of your question is, what is our fresh start back as a corporation into the world? We never totally abandoned the world. We let our judgment manage our obligations to our members and our employees. Our CEO is remarkable, and he's very, very in touch with reality. He knows when it's time to pull the plug and let's work remotely and be cautious. And he also knows when it's time to face the reality of we need to be back in the workplace, even whatever the distance requirements are, we need to be able to accommodate that. I know that in our area, several financial institutions were only operating by appointment. Now, how would you like to have, and this distinguishes a credit union from the what I call brand X. But what do we think about how to make an appointment to sit in a parking lot, to go in and make a multi-deposit teller line transaction? what do we feel about having to make an appointment? I had this happen to me, to go to sit in the parking lot till my number was drawn, like I was at Baskin and Robbins, so I could go go visit and open up my safety deposit box and put some things in and out. What a simple thing that was restricted by these regulations. So I think when we talk about fresh start to me means let's evaluate what reality is. And our credit union, our particular credit union, and I'm proud of this credit union. I'm proud to be part of it, as you can tell. But our credit union has taken a very, very common sense approach to what the reality is. Now, we operate in big cities, we operate in little cities. And that has a bearing as well because of the community aspect. You know, communities are communities and cities are cities. And the attitudes vary from place to place. So we have to be adaptive to that as well. At the same time, and I'll say this and I'll let someone else pick up. At the same time, we cannot let fear be our guide. We have to walk away from fear and let what is our opportunity to be our guide. That's my, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that this is, it is a collective fresh start. It is this opportunity to reset, recharge, rethink everything, rethink our business strategies, rethink how we engage with one another. I think that it's a collective restart and then another restart and then another restart. I think this will be a process for all of us. I think that we're going to have some ebbs and flows, that we're going to have some highs and lows. I truly believe that we're going to stumble along this for a little while, but in the end, we'll all be in a better place to serve our members and to serve one another and to serve the credit union movement. This is a great opportunity. A lot happened in the years of the pandemic, not just the pandemic. I think the pandemic was a blessing in that all of us were at home to sit and watch what was happening in the world. And so now that we have this moment, this momentous collective restart as a nation, as a world in many cases, on so many levels, not just from pandemic, but socially as well, we can't go back. You know, we're almost at this place of we can't go back. We have to keep going forward. You know how they talked about too big to fail brand Xers, I guess, using Ed's term. That's where we are, I believe, certainly as a credit union movement. We're at this place of we cannot fail at this now. We have to keep pressing forward and bring everyone along with us. And we are so uniquely poised to do so in this movement. This idea of people helping people puts us right smack dab in the best place to continue to move us forward.
And with that, in the moving forward, a question I have for the panel, and Ashley, maybe even stay with you to start us off. Do you think now with this, we have a balanced life of work and home, and people are working from home, and we really want that? Is that blurring of those lines going to affect the emotional well-being of our teams? Do we know when to stop working? Are people taking time for themselves? How do we focus on mental wellness moving forward?
Yeah, that, you know, working from home, while it was a saving grace, it also added to feelings of isolation. It certainly added to burnout, because when do you stop working when you can work all night long or all morning long? And so those blurring of the boundaries is something that we have to be very conscious of, because it increased the complexity of engagement, and engagement has a direct impact on the emotional well-being of our team. So as leaders, we have to remember that engagement or thinking about the emotional, the mental health of our team is not just another thing on our plate. It truly is the plate that everything that we do has to reside on. And so if we set proper boundaries, if we set proper expectations, if we communicate, if we are there for our teams and we really show them that whether they are in the office or they are not in the office, they are a part of this team and they matter. I did an exercise with a group of my leaders before where I had a puzzle and I had one missing piece. And then when we turned the puzzle over, they saw that all of their names were all on the puzzle pieces and we were missing one of the names of my leaders. And I'm like, this puzzle is not complete without you. And it was during the pandemic that we did this, but it was a great visual illustration of how important we are when we are connected together. And that connectivity is no longer hindered by, geography or, time zones for that matter. We have the ability to connect in so many precious ways now. And that is going to help the emotional well-being of our team members, and being very engaged and committed to that process is how we can undo some of that burnout and stress that may have been caused by remote work.
Juan, final thoughts on this when it comes to the future and emotional well-being?
As far as the emotional well-being, I think Ashley, hit everything very well. The only thing I'd add is I did, and this might be a little drastic, but I did attend a leadership conference last year, and one of the credit unions that was there had instituted a policy that the computers couldn't access the server within certain times, like after 8 o'clock or whatever, unless they were in the office. So if you still needed to go to the office, you could and work there, presumably if there was an emergency or something like that. But the VPN, the remote connection wouldn't work on during certain hours. And they did that to make sure that employees were not, they took a break, and they went and spent time with their families and lived their lives. I just think that's critical. I mean, if we don't love ourselves, we can't love others. So I think each and every one of us needs to resist the temptation of always being on the computer and take time for ourselves, for our team members, for our family, our relatives, our loved ones. The final thought I'd leave everyone with it's just that I think this is such a timely conversation. I think we need to take the best practices and the things that we learned from during the pandemic and exercise that. But also, now that we can, and that we have the vaccine, let's see each other and love each other and prioritize people now that we have the opportunity to once again see and touch each other again.
Thank you, Juan. Ed?
Yes, two things. One, going back to your comment, Brandy, of your third grader, it concerns me that there are some lost skills in this 2-year time frame, including grammar, the ability to use grammar properly, to communicate properly. That hit home when you talked about writing skills. So those are things that we need to be mindful of, not only as children, for our children, but for ourselves as adults. I mean, how we present ourselves in written form grammatically is very, very important. So but I'm going to close with what I said in the beginning. I just want to tell you, thank you for this opportunity. And before I say anything else, I want to tell everybody on this panel and everybody on in the audience, I love you.
Thank you, Ed. And Danya, final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll make this quick. We love you too, Ed. And I did some research. It takes at least 21 days to break an old habit. And so while our habits and our experiences have shaped who we are today, the decisions we make today shape who we become in the future. And so I would just implore everyone to think on, during the pandemic, what were those habits? What were the good things? Where did you meet with success? how can you repeat that? And more importantly, how can you share that with others so they can meet with success alongside you?
Thank you, Donya, and thank you for spurring this conversation with your article. We appreciate that very much. My final thought here in my after the pandemic is really to be intentional, right? To be intentional with our time, be intentional with our focus, be intentional, as Ed's point, with our love, to be intentional with our outreach with Juan. And we talked about, there are so many important considerations that we discussed today: empathy, procedures, and really looking out for one another in that engagement and connection. And with my third grader, he may not have the handwriting, but he can sure as heck Zoom better than me all day, running around the building while also on social media, while typing faster than I've ever been able to type. So there are skills learned while skills potentially lost, but we will be intentional about his growth and the path forward. And that is important as well. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget that our Commitment to Change conversations are every third Friday of the month at 1 p.m. Eastern. The next one on June 17th is the Young Professional Leadership Awards. It is the inaugural CTC Young Professional Leadership Awards ceremony. So please join us. And we've talked about it in the chat today, but annual conference registration is live. So that'll be August 23rd to 27th. So I know that we'll put the link, yep, it's already out there. The link is ready to go. So please check that out as well. Thank you again to the panelists for all of your expertise today. Thank you for everyone that joined us for your engagement. Thank you, Renee, and to the board of AACUC for all of these Commitment to Change conversations. Hope you all have a wonderful and beautiful day.